Good morning, it's Brian. It is the Art of Startup War. Welcome back again. This is Expert Dojo talking about an investment that we have made into a company that we believe is going to be huge. As always, this podcast is listened to by 2 or 3 different groups. Number one, investors that are looking to make a ton of money. And you're looking to make money, you don't want to hear it from people who are just talking about what they might like or what they might do in the future. You want to hear it from folks who've actually already invested in these companies themselves. And you want to hear why we've invested in these companies and what we love about the companies. And I'm going to share that in the podcast. The second type of person is going to be an entrepreneur, people who really want to see the journey, but they want to see the journey through the eyes of people who are already being very successful on that journey. And the third group of people are people who are wondering why the heck we do investment or we're entrepreneurs in the first place. And you're all welcome. And today I've got a brilliant company that we have made an investment in. I am so pleased to bring Wendy onto the show. Wendy, welcome.
Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And we're going to talk about, so we're going to look through this from the lens of the hero's journey, which is what you did to actually make it onto this path, how you came up with the idea, the genesis of that idea, how you then turned that into a product, where it's going in the future. And then where we come in, which is we look at it from an investment perspective, which is just a very cold, logical perspective of what is the probability of this company becoming a unicorn in the future and why we believe that's going to be the case. So we're going to hit all of it. But at the beginning, let's just talk about Shift and talked about where it came from, when the idea started, and when was that moment you suddenly thought, oh, we can actually do something to fix this.
Yeah, I love talking about the origin story. It actually has 2 parts. So I actually was most recently in higher education and found myself moving out of that space. And one morning got an email about a grant that was being offered for really cutting edge technology that was going to address a massive social issue. And so over my morning coffee, I thought, wow, I could use virtual reality and help address implicit bias in our world, which has always been my work and my passion for my whole career. And so that launched me into the space of using this technology and finding out just how powerful it was and what all it could be applied towards. And so that my first few months, I got a bunch of grants and built a product and tested it, and people were just blown away at how being immersed in a completely different world can so impact the thing that you're learning. And so from there, I thought I was off to the races, raised a small amount of money and moved into corporate and brought on a co-founder, and things were going great. And then, the world melted and the pandemic hit, and my advisor said, well, just buckle up and see if you can survive this and try not to fold. And I said, no, thanks. I'd like to thrive. And how can I continue to serve while using this really cool technology? And I came up with the idea to help the healthcare workers who are being asked to go into this, what I like to call early on a virulent pathogen, and they didn't know how to handle it. And how do they don and doff their protective equipment when they didn't have equipment to practice with? And so that put us into the healthcare space. And the journey from there has been a whirlwind and absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic, because really the nurses are the most important people on the planet right now. And I think everybody in the world would agree. And when I look at the training that they've gone through over the years, it is not even close to being adequate for what a nurse would require to go through even a fifth of what that person needs to go through on a daily basis. When did you come to that realization, and how did you feel that virtual reality is going to be the solution? Or is it also to actually improve the training itself?
Both, really. I mean, it is a solution for what is becoming a massive, massive problem. Even before the pandemic, nurse training was antiquated and unloved by most who were participating in it, and leaving nurses really unprepared. And so, but once the pandemic hit and the extra stress that they're under, it really just rocked the whole system to its core. And the reason that I think, I truly believe that virtual reality can be such a powerful solution is the nature that it's repeatable. They can take it anytime, over and over again, but it's not just boring and rote memorization that really doesn't teach anybody anything, but they actually can live the situation in the scenario, and they get muscle memory and the technical training all in one. But nurses, they come in and they give everything they've got, and they're there to support us when things are going poorly or when they're going great. But they're our first point of contact as patients, and they're the people who liaison with all the rest of the team. So they're really the most important component here. And yet their training just doesn't get them where they need to be that powerful influence. And we hear it over and over and over again from people who participate, who are our customers. Every single nurse I've talked to has that story. In the beginning, when I first started, I wasn't prepared and this horrible thing happened and I didn't want to continue. And nurses don't go into this field for money. They go into it for compassion and caring. And the system is just really abusing them right now. And we and others like us need to step up and make sure the nurses are getting what they need, and particularly at the point of training, so they feel empowered and they can walk into any patient room and know that they have the skills to take care of that patient.
Yeah, wonderful. And it's funny when I think of nurses and I think of nurses training and then I think of what they actually do in the field, it's for me the same as military. Like there's literally no difference. Like the bloody horror of what they have to go through afterwards is exactly the same as somebody in the military. But can you imagine somebody going into the military and learning everything through books? Like that's the entire preparation, because it prepares part of what they need, but it doesn't give them the immersive feel for what they need. So I think virtual reality, I can't believe there's anybody out there that would disagree that it is an imperative part of the training, if not all of the training, whereby nurses are able to do something in a fully immersive environment and be able to do it at 12 o'clock in the evening, 2 o'clock on a Saturday, relearn, get better, get more prepared with more curriculum. So that's a given. And that was brilliant that you brought that through. What about the curriculum itself? How did you look at that? And how much of it was taken from the existing curriculum? And how much of it did you actually feel were additional parts that needed to be added in based on feedback that nurses were telling you?
We always partner with someone when we're developing our curriculum, because we have extraordinary skills in the training capacity and the technology and startup. Nurses are best at training other nurses. And so we bring in partners to do the content. When we originally started with our infection prevention series, we wanted to make sure that it was to WHO and CDC standards. So we partnered with a university, and we actually bring nurses and nurse educators into our motion capture studio to make sure that everything is done to at accurate precision that's mandatory for this kind of training. So, but the content that they learn, that is always up to par. It's just because it has to be for regulations. But when you have to learn it in a book, or it's really boring, or it's just click through and answer a couple of questions, the nurses themselves will say, I didn't pay attention and I'm not learning. And then I had a recent experience firsthand. I saw nurses that were having to do an urgent procedure, and they had to go and print out a piece of paper and look at the piece of paper and then try and do the steps on it. And they were confused and they hated it, and they were all very upset. And so that impacted them negatively, the patient and the patient's family. And so when you're having nurses who are doing these life and death scenarios and they have to look at a piece of paper on a checklist because their training was inadequate, we don't want that. They don't want that. And virtual reality is an incredible solution. And as you're saying, Brian, I don't talk to anyone around the whole world who says, no, I'm not sure VR is the thing. They all want to know, how quickly can we get like half of nurse training into virtual reality, because they know for sure that this is the way it has to go.
Fantastic. So, okay, done, product fit, 100% in place. Everybody agrees. But I think what must have been one of the nicest things was, as you then developed it and you went out to the hospitals and you started speaking to the health systems themselves, and rather than going through the usual bureaucratic responses that you would expect to receive, you started to get these people saying, actually, we really like this and we're prepared to bring you in. Talk me through some of the early responses and how that engagement moved forward and how it made you feel just as they started taking it in and you started getting clients on board.
Yeah, actually, it was really wonderful. And some of my favorite stories come out of that. So we got 4 really early big customers, and they were doing our phase rollout. So they started with a bit of a smaller group. And so we would go just to be observers and be in the room. And the nurses would come in and they're like, yeah, this is another training. And they'd shuffle in and they'd be like, wait a minute, what are these things doing here? And within 2 minutes of being in our surface cleaning module, they were just laughing and carrying on. And they're like, oh my goodness, I'm not wiping this right. And they would wipe harder and they get so engaged. And then they would take off the headset and be like, okay, how much of our training can we do in this? Because this is the best training I've ever taken. But my favorite was the head of the ER for one of our hospital systems came to see this as a favor to a friend because, they want me to see this VR, I'll go do it. So he came down and he took it. And then he came to me after he took off the headset and he said, well, I came down here as a favor. I didn't expect to like it. And I especially didn't expect to think it was the coolest way of training I've ever seen.
Wow.
And how many programs do you have for my department? And that's the response we get every time. The management loves it, the participants love it, and they just, how much can we get is always the question.
And everybody's loved Shift all of the way through. I even remember how hard it was to get you in the dojo. I had to call you and say, I promise you, it's the best program. And you're like, Brian, we have so many investors coming in. We've had investors from this person, investors from this fund. So you have two skills which are really difficult generally for an entrepreneur that's coming in from the private sector who hasn't done it like 4 or 5 times already. The first thing is you're an exceptional money raiser. You're just really, really, really good. And I think if anybody's watching this on YouTube, and actually even if you're listening to it on Spotify or one of the other channels, you hear the conviction in Wendy's voice. You feel that there's no question of whether this is going to be successful or whether this is not going to be successful because she's an executor. Like that just comes across. And as a startup, especially the first time, it's very, very difficult to communicate that. Even if you are, it's very difficult to communicate that to investors. Is that something, we'll start with investors and then I want to move to execution within the company as well, which I'm equally complimentary about it. But the investors part is normally a more challenging part. How did you navigate those waters? And then talk about some of the investors that you brought in and how you managed to get those investors on side and believing in your vision of where all training is going to go in the future.
Well, it really, I think, Brian, comes back to when I got started. I knew that this was an interesting journey to go on. And so I surrounded myself with mentors. And some of them told me, when you have your product idea written out, go find someone that you think will just rip it to shreds. I think it's the worst idea in the world. And tell them about it first, because everyone, your friends and family are going to say you're fantastic and it's the best thing in the world. But you want the person who knows better. And so that's the first thing I did. And I went to a world leader in implicit bias or equity training. And I said, here's my idea. Tell me what's wrong with it. And after 20 minutes, he said, I don't see anything wrong. And here's $50,000 because it's right. And so 2 weeks later, I had my first round closed.
Wow.
And so that one went really fast. And so I was like, oh, okay.
But that's highly unusual. Like it's not, look, we invest money. So it's not like I'm looking for investment for its first time, but we're always looking for follow-on investment because we want to make sure our companies have the liquidity to go forward. And generally entrepreneurs go through hell. Generally entrepreneurs have to go through 10, 50, 100, 200 investors to get one person interested to maybe come back in the future. And then that person is wishy-washy and floppy. And not because they're bad people, it's just because it's such a guessing game at the beginning. People are not sure. But you're coming in cold with your first person, and that person loves the idea so much they put the investment in. Like, what do you believe it was that they saw in you to have the ability to actually take this over the finish line?
I think definitely the passion and the commitment and the drive. I've asked someone early on when I was just starting, they'd say, so, how many states would you like to be in? And I said, states? How about countries? Yeah. States aren't enough. And they're like, that's what we see in you and the ability to do it.
Yeah, amazing. I do too. Just a crazy drive. You make me look like I'm lazy, but that's okay. I don't feel too bad. And then after that first investor, what happened after that on the investor side?
So I brought in all strategic investors for that round. And then because Maggie and I are female founders, we kept it lean and we were able to build product and get our first customers. And then when we made the pivot into healthcare, I came up with the idea on a Friday. We wrote it out and pitched it on Monday and got a 6-figure government contract by Friday. Amazing. And so that really set that in motion. And so we said, okay, we're in healthcare and we have a contract to build the product. We should probably surround ourselves with some healthcare people. So we reached out to someone we knew who was in health tech. And he said, oh my goodness, this is going to make my last exit look like peanuts. And this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. You're going to do well and do good. Let me call some friends. And we raised 275,000 in 18 hours to get that started. So that's just kind of the momentum, bring in the right people. And often they are the people that I look to say, you're missing the mark on this one. And they're the ones who get the most excited. So
And
yeah.
this is what people feel about you. This is what we found about you. I still remember Genevieve, who heads our healthcare department, called me up and she said, "I'm going to put you on with Wendy." And she said, "Listen, don't mess this up. She's going to be, don't mess this." This is the hard time I get at Expert Dojo, right? She's like, "Don't mess this up. She's going to be huge. This company is on the cutting edge of what is to come." It's not even a maybe. Like, it's a has to be. And I think what we've seen happening since with Facebook, and let's forget about their intentions or whether they're good people or whether they're the devil, just for a moment, and just look at their choice of brand and how they've suddenly gone to meta, and the metaverse has become the important thing. And that metaverse is virtual reality, augmented reality. It is the crossing over between gaming and reality, which is something that you saw 2 years ago. So they're moving directly into a world, which is a world that you've already created for nurses. And I think it starts with nurses and then it goes further. And I want to move to that go further vision in a couple of minutes. But before I do, investors, for anybody listening, they can see that you're exceptional with investors and they can see why investors will want to invest in you. I don't mean will invest in you. You remind me actually of another person when I had that person pitch in front of a bunch of people and they started diligencing the deal. And one person in the room said, "I just need to make sure that you're aware." It was a female as well, but she said, "I just want to make sure that you're aware that you're not actually diligencing her. She's diligencing you." And I feel that with you all the time. And I remember when we first brought you in, we were so pleased because that feeling of execution, that feeling of passion, that feeling of ability, and you need to have all three. Just passion on its own isn't enough. And you have it in spades. And then your co-founder is exceptional and just compliments you in all of the areas that you really want a co-founder to be there for you on. So I want to move to execution. And I want to move to execution and talk about yourself and Maggie as well, and how it is that you've done such a difficult thing, which is come into the early stage space where you have to wear every hat. You have to be the product developer. You have to be the product manager. You have to be the business development person. Oh, you're the investment relations person. Oh, and by the way, if you need to clean the place before you leave in the evening, yeah, you're that person too. And that's so challenging for people. And it's one thing is saying execution. Another thing is actually doing execution. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit about how you navigated that and how you made sure that you just nailed it in such a huge way? And I mean both of you. Let's take Maggie into this a little bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in the process of interviewing for a co-founder, that was a key component was having someone who had some similar abilities and skill sets, but then enough differences. And it really comes down to, I know where my weaknesses are. And so I needed someone who could complement that and take that over. And I needed someone with experience. I knew that being a first-time founder counts against me. And so, I needed someone who had started, grown, and exited companies in the software as a service and training space. And I really was hoping to find that in a woman because I love the idea of being a fully female-founded company. And so the interview in the first couple of days process was, what can we do together and make that thing better? And then can we each own our own lanes? And she is just a phenomenal COO, managing all the pieces around the execution of the vision and acknowledging that I am the owner of the vision and the huge passion, but then she can make all those things happen. And I think that the pivot was a prime example. I called her up and I said, "I've got this great idea. All these nurses immediately need to learn how to do PPE, but they can't because they don't have anything to practice on. We need to build something." And she's like, "All right, let's talk about how that was going to happen." And so she then takes that and we organize it into an execution plan. And then we stick to it. And she helps me really stick to that and not get lost in but this idea and that idea, and stay just laser focused on what our product is and the market that it fits and making those two connect. So she does bring a phenomenal skill set.
And I have so many things to unwrap with that. The first thing is, I actually, funny, don't believe in pivoting. I don't believe it happens. I think it's pure execution. I think
Mm.
when you execute properly, what happens is you execute, and executing properly means spending more time listening to what the customer tells you than actually spending time thinking about what you're doing. So you decide your execution, you know the general concept of it, you know it involves the future of training is going to be metaverse, virtual reality. It's going to be something which is more interactive so we can retain more information and the training is more effective. Boom. Great thesis, works. And then you say, we're going to try it in multiple different sectors and we're going to see which one of these sectors actually becomes the best sector to do it in. And then we'll find out based on listening to the customer if we become generalists, if we become specifists, and if we actually then take this to a place which is huge. And because you're listening to your customer, you see healthcare. Healthcare is so obvious, it smacks you in the face. The pandemic comes out, which means any of the any thought of ever bringing nurses back into some big classroom with 100 nurses in there and some talking head at the top of the class telling the nurses what they should be doing and then giving them a book. Like any thought that would ever come back again is gone forever. So all you did was pure execution, which led to evolution of the product. Simple as that. And you
Mhm.
did that absolutely beautiful. I will say, like, Maggie's a rock. So, and you see it in her and how she works. I really truly believe that women are better executors than men. Like, I know I have loads of males in my cohort and I'm technically a guy as well, but it just is what it is. You can't fight with the truth. And when it comes to operations, put a woman against a man for operations, and yeah, I'm generalizing, but I'm not wrong. Like, it's just the way it works. And Maggie is no exception to that rule. She
Yep.
just sits there. You know it's going to get done. How did you find her? Like, one thing is saying, yeah, I went looking for a co-founder and I found the perfect one and I skill gapped, which by the way is another thing I love as well because hardly any people do it, not even effective people, because they
Mm.
get caught between their ego and the result. While
Right.
skill gapping is the most important thing because it's where we always fall down. But how the hell did you find her?
My mentor again, those early advisors, just surrounding yourself with the people who know. And I love to mentor people who are at earlier stage than me to pay it forward because I would not be here without with people like you. And I would say that's the thing that tipped me over the edge for Dojo is the engagement that you guys have that goes so far beyond the program, and no one else out there offers anything close. And I have not been able to would not have been able to get anywhere without my mentors. And so it was one of the people early on who said, "Stop doubting yourself, Wendy. Get out of your own way. You've got something here." So when it came time that I needed a co-founder, I went back to these mentors and said, "Hey, you know me. You've been mentoring me. Do you know anyone who could do this?" And so it was an intro from a female mentor of mine.
Yeah, it's a super team you've put together, and the engagement, the execution, the customers you're bringing on board, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I want to take us to the final part, which is really looking at that vision and where that
Mhm.
vision goes going forward. I want to make a couple of statements though first to all investors who are listening. You are not diligencing this company. This company is diligencing you. This is not a company that needs investment. This is a company that's prepared to accept investment from the right investors as long as you can add value. If there's no value that you can add, it's highly unlikely that you would be able to get into this round or any other round. It just is what it is. I'm sorry. We'll find other folks that need the money if you want to get into another one. But this one here, you have to be able to add value. I would also add one other thing to people who are listening as well is look, whether you're an investor or not an investor, as Wendy's pointed out and said so eloquently, this isn't really about the money. It's about surrounding ourselves with great people and making sure that those people are really in it to make sure for a pay it forward. I actually think of it as circle it forward, right? You pay it forward because other people have paid it forward to you, right? So it's a big circle of people who are of the same mind, whereby if you help other people and we all rise on top of each other's shoulders, then we all get much stronger from it. So investors, as you're listening through here, if what you're thinking is, I love what they're doing for nurses. I love nurses. I love what I've seen over the pandemic and all these wonderful people getting there. I want to make sure that these folks get access to better training, better preparedness for what's going to come in the future. Then reach out to Wendy afterwards and say, look, maybe you want my investment, maybe you don't, but I want to help. I have this level of expertise. How can I help? We're building an army here, and that army is to make the world a better place. So, okay, that's my soapbox out of the way. Talk to me about the vision, the big vision. Like, where do we go from this? We know that we can put this training with nurses all the way through all of the hospitals in the United States. We know then we can take it beyond the United States because every nurse on the planet wants to be better prepared and better trained so that they can be more effective and stronger from a mental health perspective in their own minds. Where do we go from there?
Well, the international piece has been from the very beginning. And so really early on in this focusing on the healthcare space, we got a grant from Facebook, who then presented our infection prevention to the WHO. And they asked us to put it in 360 so it could be rolled out on a phone in developing countries. And so that was an early intro into the international approach. But nurses are universal. There isn't any country in the world that doesn't have them, and they far outnumber physicians. And so when you look at the areas where we're focusing, which is nurse training, so you've got all the nurse training programs in the world, then you've got the gap place between graduation and first job. There's a lot of opportunity there. Then you've got all the nurses that are being hired that are currently working in hospitals. You've also got travel nurses, and then there's the union. So it just can go so much bigger. Sometimes with the virtual reality, the hardest part of every conversation is keeping focused on our future, because that's all this squirrel moments. Oh, and you could do this, and you could do this, and be over here. So we're really focused in on this initial place of nurses training, making sure they've got what they need, but their training is just absolutely vast, from what they have to have in school to when they're onboarded to annual mandatory trainings and annual competencies. So they spend a lot of their time in training. So,
and actually, when I think about it, there's no end to this, really. I mean, because you have so many things nurses have to know. I mean, imagine the amount of things. Like, you talk about like cleaning and making sure that the place is thing. Like, that's thought of as the smallest, tiniest thing, but it's a training in itself. All the way through to how do they assist with surgeries? How do they make sure that somebody who's in the middle of a waiting room, how do they watch those people to make sure that they're okay? Like, all the way across, there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of trainings that could be done, all short bits which could be paid for on a subscription basis by hospitals, or on a basic level where there's premium levels and there can be more that can be charged on top. Like, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue which can be made by providing a service which helps the world in one of the biggest ways possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just mind-boggling to me. You know, the other thing I think when I always think about nurses is the fact that maybe of all people that have jobs, not even maybe, they are the most diligent. Like, really. Nobody's going into nursing because they're going to win, like they're going to make like $10 million. They're not going into nursing because they want to get the biggest promotion so that they can become the line manager in their job. Like, they go into nursing, 99% of everyone I've ever met, because they love helping people.
Yeah, exactly.
And because of that, they are going to want to love learning to help people better, especially if it's more fun. So yeah, I go as far as to say, look, this isn't even just a need. This is a right that nurses have to make sure that the training that they're getting given is actually in line with what they deserve to be able to do a job which so few other people would have the capability of doing, or even the desire to do, based on what they have to go through on a daily basis. So we owe this to them to make sure it gets out to market. For everybody else who's listening, guys, you want to support this, and ladies, you want to support this, and you want to make sure that this company drives all of the way through. You have a phenomenal team. You've heard about the product, an incredible product. You've seen the vision, all training for all nurses everywhere in the world. I personally think, as does Wendy, this is just the beginning of where this training will actually go to afterwards. But just that business on its own is not a unicorn. It's a decacorn. It's a $10 billion company plus, and that's just the beginning. So anything to add before we make sure that everybody has your contact details?
No, I appreciate being able to come and talk to you about this and have the passion reflected back for really and truly helping the people that, yes, they deserve it the most. The risk they take on our behalf, they deserve to be well trained and well treated for that job.
Yeah, congrats on everything you're doing to both you and Maggie. It's just a phenomenal thing you're doing out there. It's amazing execution. I'm so proud and pleased that we're a partner of yours and we've had the opportunity to invest. And we're 100% with you all the way. And I know all other investors who are with you are exactly the same. How can people contact you by email, either yourself or Maggie, whatever you prefer?
Yeah, so my email is wendy@shiftbias.com. And that's the best email to reach me at.
Wonderful. And then everybody can always contact me as always at brian@expertdojo.com if you want to be connected as well. Wendy, thank you. Let's build the most beautiful unicorn there's ever been.
Let's do it. Thank you, Brian.
And that's a wrap.